Alrighty. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin Satterwhite. I use she, hers pronouns, and I am the membership coordinator for ASH. And I'm very, very excited to welcome you all to the second Membership Monday ever, where we're going to be talking a bit about leadership pathways through ASH. So I have some really wonderful, beautiful people here with me today that are going to be kind of helping me navigate this. So I will pass it over to them to introduce themselves. I'll also give my land acknowledgement once they have introduced themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we're going to navigate the next 45 minutes or so together. So, Antonio, if you want to start.
Yeah, of course. Hey, folks. My name is Antonio Duran. My pronouns are he, him, his, él, and I'm an assistant professor in the higher and post-secondary education program at Arizona State University, which means that I currently reside and I'm in Phoenix, which rests upon the ancestral homelands of the Akimel O'odham and Peepash nations. And so I want to give acknowledgement to the nations that have stewarded this land, both past and present.
And Dr. Ren?
Having clicker problems, and I thought I had that right. Um, Afternoon or early afternoon, wherever you are, folks. My name is Chris Wren. My pronouns are she and her. I am a professor of higher education at Michigan State University, which resides on the ancestral traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy, of the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Ottawa peoples. And like Arizona State, Michigan State University is a land grant university. So if you haven't already taken the chance to go to landgrabu.org, you can see the specific lands from which our institutions continue to benefit. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for that. And I'm joining us from Austin, Texas, which is the traditional homelands of the Credo, Corso, Kickapoo, and the Calahoo-Chan peoples. And I also, just give me one sec. Oh, perfect. I had land grab you ready to put into the chat, so I appreciate you doing that already. Please, please, please take a look at that resource if you haven't already. So thank you all so much for your introductions. So for today's agenda, as you can see, I have my new name on here. I know, it's very exciting. So we just did our introduction of today's wonderful speakers. I'll talk a little bit about what Membership Mondays is as a concept. I have a poll. I just want to hear kind of what brought people here today. And then we'll talk a bit about like the ASH structure, get a better understanding of kind of all of the kind of working pieces and the over 250 volunteers that make ASH tick. And then we'll do our guest panel, and then we'll finish out with kind of pathways through career stage. So we'll talk a little bit about what those specific opportunities look like, and kind of where they might fit in with where you're at in your life trajectory. So that's a bit about today. Let's see. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for this poll because I would love to see everyone's faces. And then I will launch this poll really quickly. And I'm just really curious as to what brought folks here today. And so I'll launch it now. And so some of the options are that you're interested in pursuing a leadership position soon. Maybe you're interested eventually. Maybe you want to learn a little bit more about the ASH structure. You're interested in gaining perspective from the panelists, or none of the above. And you might want to put that in the chat. So whatever that looks like to you, feel free to put that in. Okay, so there's some that are interested now, some interested eventually, learning more about the structure. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all so much for participating in that. It's always nice for me to kind of see why people are showing up, especially because this is such a new program. Basically, with Membership Mondays, our whole goal is to create spaces where we can go into deeper dives into all the things that uh, Ash could hopefully offer you and support you as you're kind of moving through your own journeys. We know that could mean you being new to the space, or it could mean you being here for 5 or 6 years and you need to like brush up on some things. Each month that we have Membership Mondays, we're going to do a different topic, and we're going to talk about all of the different benefits, ins and outs of ASH, and we'll have folks joining us throughout the run of the series. So I appreciate you all being here today. I will go on ahead and get started by kind of just showing you all a bit about our org structure. So I'll pull that up. Sorry, my computer started acting really weird. You gotta love Zoom. All right, can everyone see that? So I wanted to start here because I think it's a good place to kind of understand all of the different moving pieces that make up ASH. I know that depending on what you do or your level of involvement in ASH, it might look very different to you. So you might get a ton of emails from me if you're new, or if you're just looking at your membership emails. You might be really tuned into the conference, so you might hear a lot from conference committee and all these other pieces, but you may not know that there are so many people that are a part of this group that really push ASH forward. And so we'll break it down. We won't go too far into the weeds on it, but I just want to do like a kind of high level overview of kind of some of the areas in which you might hear or see, and then it will be helpful probably for when our panelists talk a bit about their experiences in the areas that they were working in. So at the very tippity top of this is Dr. Jason Gilbo, who is the executive director for ASH. And it was for a very long time, it was him and one other staff member, which I legitimately don't understand how they did that, because now we have 5 staff members, which is really great. I have myself as a membership coordinator. We have a communications coordinator named Naomi. We have our assistant director for events named Alicia, and then we have our admin director, which is Briante. So that's a bit about some of the professional staff positions, but throughout our governance, we have some other areas in which are all volunteer, basically. And so I'll start off kind of on the right side of the map, if that helps. And so there are some strategic work groups that kind of pop up and pop out. They're more ad hoc, so they're not going to be standing groups. And we've actually just added 3 more strategic work groups. So there's always kind of those groups that may pop up that are appointed. And one of the things that I'll show you at the end is that if you are interested in doing any of the things that we talk about, we actually have a interest form that you can just submit your name. So it's like, if something pops up in the middle of the year, you might have a specific expertise, then we might be able to tap you to kind of increase that pool of folks that are helping out. And so ad hoc committees are great ways to kind of like ease yourself into getting into some of those pieces and have a wonderful product that helps out not only ASH, but helps out the field at the end of that. We also have, for any of our graduate students, we do have the graduate student committee, and that is a committee that started, I think this is going to be its 3rd year. And so a fairly new committee, but really wanting to expand our reach and understanding how graduate students are very important to this space and how they can also support other graduate students, but also have a voice within the space, right? And it's not the only graduate student voices that exist. It's just kind of one group of graduate students. And as you'll hear, there are graduate students kind of salt and peppered throughout all of our areas, which I love. In our entities and our groups, which if we're moving from the right, you probably are aware of our councils. So we have 4 official councils. We are hoping to move to an entity structure in which we can have maybe 9 or 10. And that's something that might happen next year. But we're really close to kind of figuring out how we can expand that and look into other areas in which we can support our members, and members can find affinity and find what they need in those spaces. And so through those, all of those councils have their own committees. They have their own exec board, and can be a wonderful space for you to get involved. If maybe feeling like going for a full committee or going for the board might be a little daunting. Start, going to a program, pre-con, awards, nominations committee. Those are committees that are not necessarily active throughout the entire year. And so could be ways for you to kind of balance out and get started in areas of learning. And yes, that's what I had there. And then when we go into our standing committees, there's a couple of committees that kind of stay solid through the test of time. The membership committee, which is one that I work with really closely, position taking committee, professional development committee, scholarships, grants, and site selection. So those are committees that regardless of whatever other changes are happening, those stay the same. We also have our conference committee, which most people might be pretty familiar with, and that is kind of set up into 3 different spaces. We have our program committee that works with all of the different programming of the conference. So all of the areas of research and of submissions, those pieces. We also have the local and community engagement, as well as our attendee engagement. So all of those different areas, and there's so many people, I think about 40 to 50 wonderful folks who spend a lot of time working on those spaces. We have an ethics committee. We have our awards committee, which kind of focuses on 3 bigger awards and is kind of separate from the council awards. So 2 different places. We do have our publications committee, which our editorial board, which works with the review of higher education. And then we have kind of the governance committees. So I know that's a lot. I kind of just wanted to go through it very quickly to give kind of a high level understanding of what's going on. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means for you and where you might be. But I also think it might be helpful just to see some of these names, just in case they might come up in our next section. So I know that's a lot, but does anyone have questions about anything so far that we've discussed? Wonderful. Well, then I will stop sharing my screen, and I will also kind of stop yapping because I want to pass this next section over to our wonderful panelists. And so I have a few questions for you both. And then if there are anyone in the audience, if you have questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat and then we can talk about that through there. But the first question that I have for you both is I would love if you could talk to us a little bit about what your leadership journey has looked like within ASH. And whoever would like to start can start.
You want to go, Dr. Duran? I was gonna say, I'm not even seeing unmute. I was like, that's silent resistance. Why don't you go ahead and get started and then.
All right, sounds good. A little bit of context. My first time coming to ASH was as a second year master's student, thanks to the encouragement and support of Dr. Z. Nicolazzo, who was a doc student in Miami while I was a master's student there. And so my leadership journey in ASH really started out in trying to to give back to places that really invested in me within the association. So, for instance, my first ever involvement within ASH was as a member of the now defunct program that I think has taken on different life in the association. But there used to be a committee or a program called Graduate to Graduate Mentoring. So the intent was that we would pair up more advanced graduate students with those who were earlier on in the graduate journey. And so I was involved in that program when it came to ASH. It was one of the first places that I was able to get connected to, especially as kind of a scared master student, not really knowing what I was doing. And so during the program, they announced, hey, if anyone wants to get involved in helping plan kind of the next iteration, please come up and talk with us. And so I was like, wow, this was a really an amazing experience. I would love to get connected. And so that's kind of how my journey all began. And then that happened in different kind of iterations moving forward. So another place where I was kind of poured into was the CEP's Council on Ethnic Participation's Mentor Protege program. And so I was a protege a couple of times, and then they announced they were looking for some graduate students to help again plan the future iterations of it. And so I was able to work with Rosie Banda and Mitsu Narui as they were then planning the next iterations of CEP Mentor Protege program. And so it really just started out with me kind of seeing where I was able to benefit from and also where I felt like I had skills and experiences to contribute to. And then not being afraid to just go up to the people leading the initiative and being like, hey, I would really love to help out if you would have me. And then that kind of took on different forms as time has gone on, to working with CP, to working with now on the board of directors. And so happy to speak a little bit more about those experiences, but that's really kind of the inception of the leadership journey for me.
Thanks, Antonio. Part of why I wanted Antonio to go first was that the way of getting involved with ASH today is very different from when I was a grad student. So my first ASH, so this is like back in the day story. In the previous century, my first ASH, there were 600 people who attended the conference. There were probably 800 people total in the organization. It was very different from how it is now, and it was also very old school. When you think about that stereotype of uh, the Mad Men era of white men in charge who would like ask their proteges to come do a thing. That's exactly how ASH was in the late 1990s. There was no open volunteering to be on committees. There was no way to get involved. The Review of Higher Ed board was hand selected by whoever was the editor. It was all so I'm from Rhode Island, and there's a phrase in Rhode Island like, hey, I got a guy. Like, oh, you need your roof done? Oh, I got a guy. Now, the guy might be Betty, but I got a guy is kind of what you say, right? But all of ASH worked on the, hey, I got a guy principle. Like, hey, I got a good guy for this. Can you, can you put my student, and it was always my student, a phrase I loathe. I'm like, this is my colleague and advisee, not my student. Can you put my student on your program committee? That'd be really great. Like it was all chummy like that, right? And over time, the very few opportunities for getting involved. So my first official, other than, reviewing for program committees, being on a program committee, again, and program committees were all I got a guy. If you're the president, you pick your program committee and nobody else has a chance to be on it. But fortunately, I benefited from some of that. Phil Altbach was one of my guys. And Altbach kind of knows everybody. So like I benefit from that system in some ways. Phil would be like, I got somebody who needs a thing to do. So somebody could use her, right? I'm like, thanks, Phil. So, was on a few program committees, and then the at-large nomination came up. And so I was an at-large member of the board in, I think, 2008, 2010-ish, somewhere around that time. And then I sort of floated around between AR Division J and ASH. I was a program chair. I was on a couple of program committees, kind of back and forth and around in different ways. And then eventually had the opportunity, was asked if I would consider running for president. It's something I had thought about for a while. I have a strong commitment to volunteer membership organizations. My mom was the executive director of a volunteer organization. I feel really strongly about the importance of volunteer organizations and the leadership of them. And so I had the opportunity to run. And of course, the first thing I thought was like, oh my God, I got to give a talk. I'm not ready for that. So that was actually what held me back from thinking about it sooner. But I did the thing and accepted the nomination, ran and was elected president. And through the grace of whoever is in charge of such things, I was the president for the fall 2019 conference, which meant I became president at the end of the 2018. So when Lori Patton Davis finished, we were in Tampa. So I was president that year, had the conference in 2019, became past president. And then we know what happened in 2020. So I was like, I try not to like sound too gloaty about it because it was just luck, but like, oh my gosh, right? What luck that was. So that was kind of my pathway through, was through program committees and being invited to be on them. But something that Leslie Gonzalez and Leslie, I had asked her to be my program chair, head of the program committee. Something that Leslie and I did was decided we wanted to open that up. So we were the first people to say, okay, we'll pick. So each section within the conference, and if you're in the middle of filling out your ASH program proposals right now, you've been looking at the sections, the section co-chairs. I have one in, and first time I've ever had it in more than a week in advance. I'm exceptionally proud of myself there. So you look at the section co-chairs, and what Leslie and I did, and I don't know if it's exactly the same now, is like let's pick one for each, and then we're going to open it up for applications. And then we'll pick one from the open applications. And in that spirit, so the president often appoints a lot of these people that are on the committees, not within the councils, but all the other committees. The president is the person who technically appoints all those people. And in the past, before I was president, it was the same way. Like you just kind of appointed your friends. And so it was all, I got a guy. And who do you know? And that was the only way to get involved in ASH at those levels. But to the chagrin of some presidents after me, not that they don't like the open principle, but it is a lot of work. Now, once a year, the president comes in, they take nomination, they take volunteers. You apply, right, to volunteer, and then Jason and Aaron probably sit down with you with a spreadsheet as president and figure out like who wants to do what and where do we fit it and how do we diversify institutional type and roles, levels within the profession, and scholarly inquiry interests and people who don't work in universities, and like how do we mix all that up? So that's the ASH that you join now, is one where there's a lot more access points in addition to the councils, which is, I think, a lot of Antonio's story, which is a really important one. So people come in through program committee, councils and committees. Those entity groups didn't even exist that way, like Cheers and Queers and Latino Dinner. None of that was there way back in the day. So I think there's a lot more access points now, ways to kind of get in that are a little bit lower stakes feeling than like, wait, I've got to like chair the editorial board of the Review of Higher Ed. What? So I think there's a lot of kind of cool ways in now. And it is something that Leslie and I, we are quite proud of that. It's probably one of the favorite things. Hiring Jason Gilbo, I did as president-elect. Most proud of that. And Jason and I started together. And then after that, I would say my favorite thing I'm most proud of is that we were able to open up these processes so that you could have on-ramps. Like it doesn't matter who you know. You don't have to have the fill out box, doesn't have to be your advisor to get involved in ASH anymore. So that was pretty exciting to us. So that is a little bit about my story and my very, very good luck with the 2019 conference. Oh my gosh, just flat out luck.
I love that. Thank you both so much for those wonderful stories. I know for me, my first ever ASH was 2019. So, and I fell in love immediately, and the rest is basically history because I liked it so much that I wanted to work for ASH. But yeah, I'm very glad that you hired Jason as well. He's phenomenal. And I heard, so both of you talked a bit about why you are involved and why you decided to stay involved, but are there any other things specifically that you wanted to highlight around the reasons why you stay involved, especially because both of you have been in uninterrupted service for quite a while now. And so I didn't know if there were any other pieces that you all wanted to share around why you decide to stay involved and kind of what keeps you there.
I think the one thing that I'll add, especially in thinking about, I agree, Chris. I mean, when you all opened up volunteer roles in those ways, that was super meaningful. I think for people coming after who wanted to get connected and involved, and that just makes me think about like, because we are an association largely run by volunteers, the association becomes what the volunteers want out of the organization, and I think we've seen people at the highest levels, right, change the tone over the organization by their themes or their decisions, but also change is made at all levels as well. And so, one example being kind of the Cheers and Queers event that I have the honor to have been running alongside Dr. Alex Lang and the future Dr. Romeo Jackson for the past 5 years now. That was just an idea that like all of us had that we had. There had been queer and trans gatherings of scholars in years past, but we had hoped to do something that could bring together individuals. And the first year, it was we created a flyer and was like, hey, let's just all meet at a bar, like a hotel lobby, hotel bar, and it's just evolved and grown from years after that. And so I think the know that if there is not a current space that is speaking to you within Ash, or if you would like to see a space, that as the organization evolves, it is open to your ideas, your dreams, the possibilities that you hope to actualize. And so that's the only thing that I wanted to add, because yes, there were service opportunities that I had already seen and wanted to get connected to, but there were also things along the way that was like the idea of like, hey, why don't we do this? So not being afraid to kind of pave your own way as well within the organization.
I'll build on that and then also pick up John's question from the chat about how do you do it in a sustainable way. Antonio, as you were just talking, it reminded me like this is admitted students time on campus, and I sort of hear the tour guides like there's I don't know 800 student organizations, and if there's not one you like, you can start your own. So I do feel like Ash has become much more open to novelty, like in the best way, right? Like to newness and to bringing people's whole selves in, which I think is delightful. I think social media helped some of that. People were making these connections in social media and wanted to be able to see each other in person. Like the mama scholars that sometimes gets together, like, oh, they were like I don't know, maybe they started on Facebook. I'm not even sure. It wasn't as far back as like MySpace, but they've been there for a while being mama scholars. So I feel like that's a thing. And thinking about like the sustainability, like, so this comes as a surprise to a lot of people. I'm not an introvert, but I'm very shy. I do not like meeting strangers. Um, my personal motto is they're not called strangers for nothing. So, because they're stranger. So I don't like meeting strangers. So for me, um, working on committees, working in relationship with people is my way to make them not strangers so that I am less shy. Like literally, like I just like meeting new people. I hate doing the thing, right? So I think for me, what kept me coming back and what sustains me is that I get that feedback loop of like, wow, that's a really cool person who maybe I've read their scholarship, maybe I've never heard of them, but I quickly Google them, right, to find out who they are. Not in a like, are they like famous, but just in a like, oh my gosh, who, I'm curious, I want to know more, right? So I think that for me, it's that what sustains me is that feedback loop of relationships. And I'm careful about how I invest my relationship energy. But the the pay the rewards of my relationship energy invested in Ash have been enormous. Just meeting some of the most amazing people who happen to be scholars in this field, right? I'm like, wow, from all over the world, right? So that's kind of amazing to me. And this question, bye, Brad. The question John asked about sustainable. So there's Ash, there's also AERA, which is, another large, even larger, if anybody was just back from there. I didn't go this year and very happy to have saved my energy on that. So thinking about, it's the buffet and you don't want to fill your plate at the first part of the buffet, right? So I think taking a little bit of time to kind of look at the landscape and think about what fills you up, what will expand your networks in like the best sense, not in like some icky, like smarmy networky way, but like I want to be working with scholars who are doing cutting edge research on X, or I want to I really want to be with the Public Policy Council because a lot of them work not at universities, and I want to understand more about that world of work with a graduate degree in higher ed. Can I go work at Excellencia in Education? Oh wow, they're over there in that group, right? So thinking about what those opportunities are, knowing that if you are early in your doc program, if for those of you who are doc students, or even before your doc program, you're going to have some time. You don't have to rush. I would avoid. So one of the things about ASH is that it can feel a little bit, for some of us, it is a space where we can feel impostery and insecure and like everybody else is smarter and harder working, and there's CVs, which I don't even know what a CV is versus a resume because I'm new to this whole thing. I'm sure their CVs are fancier than mine with more lines on them. I would really discourage thinking of ASH involvement as a CV building moment. I would really encourage it as a like building out your humanity kind of moment. It's really easy to sometimes show up at ASH and feel like, again, everybody is smarter than me and harder working and has more grants, pubs, committees, whatever the thing is you're comparing. And I still feel that way sometimes when I show up at ASH, right? What do they say? Comparison is the thief of joy, right? Like, so don't let that comparison to other people at ASH, these things do it. So don't join committees and things because you think you're supposed to, it's going to help you in the job market. Do it because you want to make relationships with people. You want to enrich yourself as a scholar, enrich your own experience. I would say that's that. But again, like you got lots of time. Even if you're in your final years of your grad programs, like ASH is going to be here for another 50 years. We're just hitting 50. So I think that's part of the sustainability. And there was a quick question. Frederica, you asked about the review. So the Review Higher Ed is ASH's official journal. The peer review committee for submissions, it's called the editorial board, and they will put out application nomination, kind of same thing, periodically, like I think it's once a year. It's been a minute since I've paid attention to that. So I'm like, oh, that sounds like work. So I'm not sure exactly when that is, but it will come out. Typically, they are looking for people who have received a terminal degree and have a history of publishing themselves for that, for the editorial board for peer review. They also need what are called ad hoc reviewers. So ad hoc is Latin for in the moment, ad hoc, like not. So you could let the editors know, like I'm not ready for the editorial board, or don't have time for that right now. But if you need somebody to review on these areas, please put me on your list. Journal editors anymore need all the ad hoc volunteers they can possibly find. For Antonio who's on the call. So I'll be quiet again, and Antonio, you can hop on some of these questions.
No, I just I the first time even thinking about like what does ad hoc really mean for for this situation. I didn't know that that's what it's meant. The only other thing that I will add about sustainability is this is where trusted colleagues, what people sometimes refer to as a committee of no, can be really beneficial. I know that I have a committee who they're just friends who really know me and know my capacity, and who I'm able to go to and say, hey, so for when I was thinking about applying as member at large, I remember having conversations with Alex Lang. Their ears are going to be ringing, but I was like, hey, I think it's finally time that I want to do this. Here my motivation. Here's what I want to. And sometimes Alex will be like, yep, that makes sense. Or other times it'll be like, I think you can take some more time to wait it on out. And I will be completely honest. Sometimes I say yes, and sometimes I just do it anyway. And I will say, usually Alex is right. And my committee. So I need to further better listen to them. But it's really helpful to have those trusted folks around you that know who you are, they know who like what you have on your plate, etc.
Yes, I agree. And Alex, we trust. Does anyone have any questions that they haven't put in the chat for our panelists? Okay, I don't see any. If you do have any that pop up for them, feel free to throw it in the chat. I do have a couple of more pieces to show you. Now that we've kind of heard a little bit about some of the different areas in which you can get involved, we have some graphics talking about each area that's hopefully a little bit more easy to digest than maybe that huge that huge org chart that I showed you at the beginning. So I'll pull that up very quickly. I was like so enamored with how y'all were talking about your experiences that I was supposed to be pulling this up while you were talking. But it's okay.
While you do that, I'm putting John on the spot. Who's the co-worker there today?
Oh, yes.
Oh, his name is Leo. He's actually not a Leo, but he acts like a Leo.
I could
He's he's always in the screen. Ask like Antonio, he's always like on my shoulders or like in the space.
Nice.
as someone who is a Leo, I get it. I get it.
I'm also a Leo, so I get it too. That's why partially why he's named Leo.
I love that. My little coworker is asleep over here, and I'm really thankful for the Zoom feature that kind of muffles the background noise because he snores like a grown man. It's like a 2-year-old dog that just like a chainsaw. A mess. But now that I have this up, I'll just pop on over and talk a little bit about what we have here. Jason and me kind of got together to think about what does this look like, and how can we kind of set it up by different areas. And so we have 4 different spaces that we'll talk a bit about. And if you have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself during this section so that it doesn't get lost in one section or another. But I'll kind of go through, we have things that are in here that are kind of categorized as all members. The one thing I will say is that we have kind of these rough guesstimates of what graduate students could do, what early career could do, what mid-career could do. There are some things that are specific to having a terminal degree, but there are other things that are not so specific, and there could be some changes in and out of what you could do. So for example, someone in their early career could chair one of these committees. They could do these pieces. Those are kind of a little more nebulous, but we have here for everyone kind of this idea of for conference, these are the areas in which you could volunteer. So you could volunteer as a reviewer, as a chair, or as a discussant. And those are 3 things that you can actively put yourself down for right now. Until the 22nd, we're going to have our volunteer for conference stuff open for anyone who is interested. Our reviewers, that is a virtual opportunity that happens over the summer. And so anyone, whether you're a graduate student, early career, to all the way up to senior, you are able to read applications, read submissions, give feedback, and do kind of a micro volunteer opportunity. We also have chairs and discussants. Both of those could be either virtual at our one-day virtual conference or in person during the ASH annual meeting in Minneapolis. We have check-in volunteers, and then we have the members of those 3 committees that we mentioned, and those are kind of the areas in which you can get involved through the conference. For graduate students, that some of those things might be a little more restrictive in good ways. Like, for example, you can apply for the Graduate Student Travel Scholarship, which is a scholarship, but also provides you with some opportunity to do some volunteering at the conference, and can be a really great way for you, especially if it's your first time, to kind of get your feet wet, get to meet some people during check-in, and have kind of a built-in group of folks that you've already kind of been talking to before the conference started, and can be helpful in those spaces. Like I said, you could be a reviewer, or you could be a chair, but you have to be, in order to be a discussant, you have to have a terminal degree. So that's just one of those areas where that is kind of specific. for our early and our mid-career and senior scholars, a lot of these pieces are the same. You're kind of welcome to do everything except for, unfortunately, apply for the travel scholarship. Maybe we'll work on getting one for everyone else. But some of those opportunities could be being a member or chairing any one of these committees. One of the things that isn't in here because it didn't fit is that Chris mentioned the program committee, and through the program committee, there are the section chairs. We have usually section co-chairs, and through that, there's a lot of opportunities. If you think about all of the different sections that are involved, there's probably 1 to 2 people who are part of that process. And so those are some of those areas in which you could also get involved that aren't necessarily in this section. So does anyone have like questions about any things that I've talked about, any words or phrases that you're like, Aaron, what in the world is that? Anything like that?
Erin, I see a great question in the chat about do other councils/committees within ASH have virtual and or face-to-face conferences?
Oh gosh, what a great question. I did not have this up and I did not see that. So all of our, I won't say all of our councils, but all 4 of our current councils, which is CAHEP so it's the Council for the Advancement of Higher Education Programs, CEP, the Council for Ethnic Participation, CPPHE, the Council on Public Policy in Higher Education, and CIHE, which is the Council for International Higher Education. All 4 of those have a pre-con that happens the day before the conference. So the conference starts on Thursday. Their pre-cons are on Wednesday, and they're kind of a 7-hour pre-con that is connected to the conference, but has a separate registration. And those are in person. We also have an athletics pre-con. So that's one of those groups that isn't necessarily officially formed, but they also have a pre-con that happens at that same time. That is the same deal. You can work through those pieces and it's in person. And then everything else that we have will be kind of more informal. I know we talked about some of the informal things. There are other groups that also meet in much more informal ways. We actually have like a historians of higher education breakfast group. And they all just get together and have breakfast, which I love, do you? And so there's a lot of other more informal pieces that happen during the conference. But those are what we have in offering so far. So hopefully that answered your question. Let's see, did I miss anything else in the chat? Okay, that's a great question. How's early and mid-career defined? And so, yes, I appreciate the clarification, Chris, around if you're looking at, it depends on the different structure that you're looking at. If you're looking at a tenure track position, it might be very clearly laid out. But for other folks, it's kind of how you identify. We're kind of thinking like 1 to 5 years in the field is probably early career, 5 to 10 years is probably mid-career. It really depends. I don't want to put that on you. I don't want to say, oh, you've only been in the field for 7 years. You can't call yourself this. So that's really what those are. And that's why a lot of these other areas, it's like pretty interchangeable of what you can and can't do. It'll all kind of just depend on the amount of experience that you have in XYZ thing, if that makes sense.
Not me having an existential crisis over no longer being able to call myself an early career scholar here soon.
I love it. Oh, let's see. Oh, colloquially older folks. Yes, there was the question about who qualifies as a senior scholar. Again, that really is up to you. Some people really don't like that term, which I can recognize. I think that it's super dignified. Some people might not see it that way. So really up
Not
to you.
dignified. I love that. Dignified.
I love it. It's just like you've arrived. Like I feel like if I ever become like a senior scholar, I will be like the queen. Like everyone bowed. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, I will tell you, it's all very relative feeling.
Yeah.
I understand that probably I am a senior scholar because I've been around a minute, and I was like, oh, and there's not that. But then I'm like, oh, no, Roger Baldwin, Ann Austen. Those are the senior scholars, right? Like Laura Rendon, Estela Ben Simon. Like, I'm like, oh, and how many of them are retired, right? So I was like, oh, kind of you level up without kind of knowing it.
Yeah.
Is I think part of it. So Antonio, you're leveling. Think of it as leveling up.
You're leveling up. I love that. We're going to think of all of these areas. Don't even think about early, mid, senior. Just think about leveling up. When you level up, these are the other things that are involved. So I'll talk a bit about entities since that was something that was mentioned. So in our entities, we do have 3 committees that are standing that happen throughout the year. We have a professional development committee for entities. We have our nominations committee. And so we have a board nominations committee, and then each of the councils has their own nominations committee. And so right there's about 15 different opportunities to be a part of a nominations board. And our awards committees are similar, where we'll have one for some of the more major, some of the more centralized awards. And then each one of the councils will have their own awards that they give out, and they'll have their own awards committees. Oh my gosh, yes. Actually, I'm gonna work on that later today. It says that we need a Super Mario model to show the leveling up, and don't worry, I will work on that visual, and we'll rework this.
I will say I saw a model of that a master student at MSU did around using Super Mario as and the level ups for first gen students. So it's not completely my idea, but yeah.
I love giving credit. So that's great. Yeah, let's think about this as like these stepping stones. For our graduate students, we have grad student reps for each of the areas. So there are 2 graduate student reps that sit on the board. We have either 1 to 2 graduate students for each of the councils. And so those are opportunities specifically for graduate students to be like a board representation within the executive committee of whatever area you are in. And then we do have our graduate student committees where all positions are graduate students. Early career, you could be an at-large member, kind of like Antonio. Our professional development and event chairs, which are either elected or appointed. It depends on the entity structure. And so that's something that you can take a look at on our council website for specifics. We have our mid-career, which is executive committee chair, vice chair. So executive committee, we're talking about the board. So potentially becoming the president, or, you know, being within those spaces of the board, at-large member, committee members, and professional development event chairs. And then the same thing kind of goes as you go and level up to senior scholar. So that's a bit about kind of some of the volunteering opportunities within the entity structure. So we talked a little bit about committees. And so these are our generalized committees outside of our councils and our entities. But for graduate students, we have the Graduate Student Travel Scholarship Committee, which I actually was very fortunate to be vice chair and chair for as a graduate student. And so at least 2 of those positions on those committees are graduate students that get the opportunity to help select those who will get those scholarship awards. And then there are also various other graduate positions for the awards, our budget committee, our ethics committee, and our professional development committees. And then for early career, you could be a committee member on any committee. That's pretty open for you. And then you can chair some committees, like for example, for our book award of the year and our dissertation of the year, we have had early career scholars. But again, that's something that is very like nebulous. So you could technically be early career and chair other committees. It also depends on, you know, the other experiences that you have. And then as you get through our mid-career, very much the same. What changes at the very end is the advisory opportunities that you have as a senior scholar when you level up to, you know, to that. Oh, there's so much reading in those two committees. Absolutely. If you really love reading, then dissertation of the year and book of the year are your committees. I tell you what, I know I personally couldn't do it, but I appreciate every single person who does do that. I mean, you get to read some amazing things, but it is a lot of reading. And then I'll go through the board of directors. So we do, like I said, have our 2 elected grad reps. We have 4 at-large board members. And so we are always doing nominations for at least 2 at-large board members. They're on and off cycle. So there will always be 2 positions open for those spaces. We also have the opportunity to have appointments on committees for our newest committee, our inclusion, equity, and organizational diversity, fundraising, and our budget publications committee. Same thing with mid-career. And then with our senior scholar, potential to be elected president. And again, a lot of these things are very like, depending on your experiences in the space, as well as everything else that I have named out. And Antonio did say that he is concluding his term in November. So if you are at all interested in joining the board, go on ahead and get those nominations in. They are due, what is that, next Monday? So not a whole lot of time, but there's still some time if you would like to do that. So those are the 4 areas. And as you can tell, I mean, I probably talked about at least 250 opportunities through this. And so there's a lot of spaces depending on what you can offer at any given time, what your interests are. And so we hope that you feel so inclined to help us as we continue to make ASH the place that it has become and continue to push the boundaries and figure out where we can make new niches and how we can make people feel more affirmed. Because we all know that higher ed and academia can be really, sometimes it can get you down. Sometimes imposter syndrome can get to you. And for me, ASH started off as that space when my first day. It was a space where I just kind of, like Chris said, thought that everyone was smarter than me and I didn't know what I was doing. And then immediately felt like, no, I have my space here. I have my place here. And the people that I chose to surround myself with were people who really fill my cup and people that I still interact with and publish with to this day. So hopefully you will find your niche within this space, and hopefully through volunteering that could help you in that process. But I will put in the chat, I may actually just go on ahead and stop sharing my screen. I will put in the chat oh my gosh, I love that. Chris, do you want to say that out loud for everyone?
Yes, I mean, hearing Erin's story, like, don't be shy. Like, again, I'm shy, not the easiest thing for me, but we've all spent an hour together in this thing. I've seen your names and at least your still photos. So now you've got 3 more people. Erin's a little busy at the conference, I have to
Oh,
say.
no, literally come and bother me. I would
But,
love that.
like, yeah, come be our friends. Like,
Yes.
because
Absolutely.
as I've told you, I don't like strangers, but y'all are no longer strangers. So that's your invitation to come up to us and say hello. We'll be in your niche.
I really appreciate you saying this idea of like make people not strangers so that you feel more comfortable around them. I like that mindset shift, and I'm going to use that. Okay, so in the chat, I just put in the job form for volunteer interest. So even if you are not interested in doing any of this anytime soon, put your name down, maybe put some of your interests down, and then if there is a place or a space for you, we might reach out and you can let us know if you have the bandwidth or not. But even if you don't, we just love to hear a little bit more. So yeah, does anyone have any questions with the remaining time? Yes, I will totally find you if you are interested in something. But does anyone have any questions about anything else for myself or for our lovely panelists?
When I know that Aaron, you will send out the recording from this session because I see Mary Ann coming in there. So yeah.
Oh, yes, I am recording. And so for everyone who is watching this after the fact, thank you for joining us virtually, well, in the future. And then for all of us who have been here, I will send this out. We'll also put it on YouTube listed. And so if you go to the ASH YouTube channel, you'll find this here, as well as every other series of Membership Mondays. We don't want to gatekeep any information. So yeah. Let's see. So for volunteering for the conference, there is something different. I'll put that in the chat. This is going to be for generalized volunteering if you're not interested in doing something right this second. For the conference, our call for volunteers will be found here. And for everyone who's not on here, it's just www.ash.ws/volunteers. Very easy to remember. It has everything that you need to know about the conference portal. We have a how-to volunteer guide, and just make sure you get all that stuff in by this time next week. So if there are no other questions, I just want to thank both Chris and Antonio so much for your lovely words and your time. I just appreciate you both for coming here to talk about your experiences. It really is like inspiring, and I just really appreciate, you all bringing some of the good and some of a little bit of the ugly, and just giving a really real experience as to how you navigate figuring this whole process out. So.
ASH is a wonderful organization, so getting more people involved and engaged is always my goal. So thanks all for spending time with us.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope you'll have a great rest of the week.